We have a new generation entering the workforce, and the one thing that has been talked about around the globe is if they're ready to actually get down to work. I'm Melissa Franks, your host of the Opt-in podcast, and today we're talking all about Gen Z, their entrance into the workforce, and if the workforce is actually ready to welcome them. I had the opportunity in May, it is now August, to speak with the San Francisco Chronicle. It's a local newspaper, digital and physical publication near me. And it was such an honor, first of all, to be able to speak with the columnist. And second of all, it was a really interesting conversation to have because I kind of walked into the interview blind. I hope you're ready for an interesting story. And then we're going to break down exactly how Gen Z is showing up in the workforce today and some tactics that you can use to help them be successful and productive employees, peers, colleagues, etc. Anyway, back to the story. So my publicist said, hey, you have an opportunity to get interviewed and they want to speak with you for 20 minutes. It's on the topic of Gen Z. I'm like, cool. I'm super passionate about mentoring our young workforce. It's something that in corporate I did all of the time. I hired as many college interns as I could. Anytime there was the opportunity to hire somebody entry level, I took it. I had more entry level employees inside of my organization, the entire company combined. Sit with that for a second. I had them all. And I did that on purpose. I did that on purpose because they knew things I didn't. They had different ways of processing information. They were really eager to learn and sponges. And the cool thing about introducing somebody to corporate America when they're right out of school is that they don't have any bad habits. And it was often a hiring practice of mine that if I could swing it inside of my organization, we always had people right out of college inside of the team. And we did a ton of mentoring and coaching, and all of them now have really successful, thriving careers, which I'm incredibly proud of. Anyway, the opportunity to talk about Gen Z was one that I was really, really excited about. Again, I had zero context. So the date and time came, the reporter called me and she introduced herself and asked me to just rip on Gen Z in the workforce. And I said, you know what? I would love to do that. And before I do, can you just tell me the premise of your article so that I can make sure that I give you what you need to be successful? And she was very kind and she said, yes, absolutely. And the premise of her article was that businesses are now hiring etiquette coaches to teach Gen Z how to behave. And my bottom dropped out of my stomach. I'm like, oh no, this is not something that I am in support of. This is not something that I want to, kind of provide guidance on where to get resources, because that's what she was looking for me to do as a business owner that advises and works with and runs small businesses. How do we get these resources for Gen Z? And I was like, oh man, I took a minute and I said, I really appreciate the opportunity. Are you okay if I have a differing opinion than your premise? And she said, yes. And so I thought, okay, well, we're going to go for it, because either it's going to get into the article and it's going to create a lot of conversation, or it's going to end up on the cutting room floor. And either way, at least I've stayed true to my perspective. And so we had an amazing conversation. We talked for 20 minutes and I was able to share very directly my point of view that Z is at a disadvantage, and they're at a disadvantage because of how they were raised. They're at a disadvantage for the world that they grew up in, and expecting them to walk into the door of any business, be it a 7-figure business or be it a $1 billion business, and expect that they know what the dress code is, that they know how to navigate politics, that they know how to build relationships and network and own a room and give a polished presentation is ludicrous, because they have not grown up in a world or environment where there was that training ground. It didn't exist. There are very few professions, all of which require an internship as a part of their graduation requirements, that teach these sorts of things. It just doesn't exist. And business etiquette is a college course that is taught to graduate students. So anybody in undergrad that's graduating and then going off and working in the real world wasn't required to take that class. So my conversation and everything that I shared with the columnist was very specifically around what we, as the older generations, the ones that know better, we're wiser, should be doing to mentor and assist and guide the younger generation to help them be successful. Also, but while retaining an open mind. So as we are getting feedback about things that just don't work for them, we can really evaluate if it's just them it's not working for, or if it really isn't working for anybody and just nobody said a thing. So, like I said, we ended up talking, I think, for almost 30 minutes. It was a great conversation, and then I wished her well and waited and waited and waited. What I didn't know is that it takes a really long time from the point of that conversation for you to end up in print. I now know these things. And sure enough, she included me in the article. Again, incredibly grateful, shocked, and I was surrounded by insights from etiquette coaches, which very candidly, I didn't even know existed until I got interviewed for the article. I actually went and looked these people up on LinkedIn. I'm like, what is this crazy business that they have? And just recently, I spoke with an etiquette coach that is local to me. She's incredibly lovely. I'm also going to include her information here in the show notes for you, as well as a link to the article. And I realized that there is high demand for this stuff. I had no clue. I literally didn't know what I was walking into. And then the next thing that I know, I continue to get emails. It's been reposted here. It's been reshared here. It's been all over here. Over 1 billion eyeballs at this point have now had the ability to review this article. It has been inside of Entrepreneur Magazine. It has been on Yahoo. It's been on India Times and a bunch of Mexico publications. Like, this thing went viral in a way that I didn't even know that digital media could go viral. And I'm hearing from people. I'm making connections on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for the things that you said. I have a Gen Z child and it's about to graduate, and this was so helpful to be able to provide them some guidance. And I'm hiring Gen Z people now, and your perspective was so helpful on helping them have a successful start. And I'm hearing from people all over the place thanking me for my insights. And I realized that they got sound bites from me, but they didn't get the full story. So today's podcast is the full story. Now, of course, if you want to read the article and you want to, have the resources of the etiquette coaches and you want to see what they're all about, I strongly encourage you to do so. It was a well done piece. I'm very proud of it. It's going to be here in the show notes. Like I said, you can also find it on my Instagram link in bio. But today, I really wanted to talk about helping Gen Z be successful in the workforce. Because one of the things that has fallen by the wayside, I'd like to blame it on COVID, but I actually think that it's just based on like a general loss of humanity inside of business, is the nurturing part of onboarding employees, and specifically those that are new to the workforce. Let's think. I was a college hire, but I had actually been inside of my job and my company for quite a while before college, so I didn't really count. But I remember I feel like it was 2 or 3 years after I graduated from college, and I was working for a very large retail corporation, multinational retail corporation in their headquarters, and August hit, and all of a sudden the new class came in, and that was literally how everybody referred to them, is that they were the new class. And there was about 100 individuals that were hired from all of the esteemed universities that were becoming employees of the company, and they had mentors. They were literally in a class, like they referred to them kind of as a single unit. They all had mentors. They arranged social outings for them. They went to baseball games. They went and had cocktails. They went on fun runs. They kept them together. It reminded me very much of Greek organizations when you were in college to a certain extent. They built a curriculum and a calendar of events for them so that not only did they have guidance professionally as they made their way into the workforce, they had this like community and this network that they could tap into, because most of them had moved to San Francisco from all different parts of the world, so they didn't really have any friends. They even helped them find housing and roommates and figure out transportation. It was an incredibly lovely experience. And then as my professional experience expanded and my professional network expanded, I found that this wasn't just the Gap that did this. That's where I was working at the time. Most large corporations had some sort of program this way. Now, granted, this was 20 years ago, and so things have changed, but what I realized was like, that was intentional, because it recognized that there is a transition from student to worker, and that in order for the worker to be successful, they need to be guided and taught and encouraged and receive feedback, and also be given kind of a homemade community. Because after all, we survive better when we have people with us than when we're alone. And as I was looking at the reaction of all of the things around the article related to Gen Z, I thought, This is actually the problem. We abandoned this idea that it takes a village not only to raise a child, but to raise a solid, productive employee. We abandoned that. Likely, we abandoned it decades ago, and it was through the lens of budget cuts, but it doesn't mean that we cannot still operate as if it existed. And so the rest of this podcast is dedicated to talking to you specifically about what those frameworks can be and how you, somebody that is not Gen Z, can help Gen Z acclimate to the workforce. So the first thing that I want to talk about is that now you've decided, you've selected the candidate, they have said yes, they're coming in the door, and they're going to show up at work. Now, they have maybe never been in an actual physical office. Or if they have worked virtually, they may have been in an environment where they weren't required to have their camera on. And so one of the things that we do when employees start is we're like, here's your benefits. Here's the employee handbook. Here's all of the policies, but we don't actually tell them the other stuff. So we should make sure that they understand what the dress code is. We should make sure that they understand what the start and end day for the business is. We should make sure that they understand the process for requesting time off. We should make sure that they understand what the unspoken rules are around being in the office or working virtually. Here is what I mean. If you have somebody that is recently graduated and they are coming to your place of employment, what you want to make sure is that they understand how the office culture operates. What does that mean? It means you talk to them about how you leverage instant messaging versus somebody driving past a cubicle or office and interrupting what's happening. You explain to them about meeting attendance and timeliness. You talk to them about silly things that some companies have, like who sits in what chair. I was once working with this executive, and if he did not sit at the head of the table, even if it wasn't his meeting, he wouldn't attend the meeting. It was just some weird thing with him, and I watched him multiple times come into a meeting room and not say a word. Somebody was sitting in a seat and he walked out. You want to be able to tell, the new person, like, hey, by the way, you shouldn't sit there because that's where John sits, and it's a thing with him, right? When you're operating in a virtual environment, you really want to tell them, hey, pay attention to what's in your background. Pay attention to ambient noises. Maybe they're still living at home with their parents, or they have roommates, or they have animals. Hey, make sure that your roommate doesn't get into a fight with her boyfriend in the middle of a conference call. You're going to want to just have very real life practical conversations with them. Now, of course, you can hire an etiquette coach to do that too, but these are just the rules of the road. Yeah, are they obvious to you? Absolutely. But if you think about it, you're talking to somebody who's digitally native, who has spent their entire life on a screen and has no qualms with whatever is playing out behind them being public display. They're desensitized to the fact that there are some things that the rest of us in life don't want to witness. And so this is an opportunity for us to communicate to them what boundaries look like and how we set those up, and whether they're working virtually or they're working in person, how to respect those boundaries and how best to build relationships. One of the other points of topic that you are going to want to have with employees, again, be it virtual or in office is a little more important, is the rules that we have around desk setup, personal effects, cell phone use, personal conversations, all of the obvious things. Every business has a different culture. Every business allows something to happen that another one doesn't, and vice versa. In some places, it's fully acceptable that you're sitting in a meeting with other human beings while you're also literally on your device and you're texting away. In other places, like one team that I worked in, we got fined 100 euros every time a cell phone showed up. 100 euros, and that was when the euro was very strong, mind you. Eventually it went to 1,000 because people were just dumping $100 bills in the middle of the table. I wish I was joking. So you want to make sure that they understand these nuances of the culture inside of the business. For some, the hardest part about transitioning from school to office, from student to worker, is dress code. For some of them, it's hard. And if you work inside of a tech company, this makes it even more difficult because sometimes inside of tech companies, the dress code is real relaxed. And so that is one. Dress code specifically is one thing that I recommend is reviewed during the job interview. I recommend that at the point where you are ready to make an offer to the candidate, you say, before we're ready to make you an offer, and to make sure this is the right fit for you, I want to go through a couple of things. One of them being dress code. And I want you to be explicitly clear with them about what the standards are, what the requirements are, and what it means for them. If you are a place where they cannot show up in sweats and Birkenstocks, you need to say so. If you are a place that has a minimum hem length and requires pantyhose, you need to say so. If you are a place that for whatever reason requires tattoos to be covered, you need to say so. If you are a place that requires only a couple of piercings to be present for some reason, you need to say so. Included in that are hygiene requirements. We are a no-sense location, which means no colognes, no perfumes, no, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No lotions with a strong smell. We have people with allergies. Whatever those rules are, I recommend those happen during the interview process and not on their first day of hire. And the reason for that is because if they feel really strongly and passionately that their personal style is a priority, and if it's not going to be accepted, then they don't want to work there, then you know before you make the offer and you onboard them. The one thing that I can tell you emphatically is that this is one of those periods of time where the cultures and generations are shifting, and there is a strong perspective on personal independence, and I'm all for it. And also, it's going to limit opportunity. It just is. There is, in fact, I submitted a statement about this today, but there is apparently this new thing on TikTok called the office siren trend. And basically what it is like, how sexy can you dress without getting fired? That was what I was able to cobble together. I had never seen it until I was asked to talk about it. And I get it and I don't, if that makes sense. I really looked at it from the lens of personal brand. You want to show up authentically as yourself. You want to feel and look attractive. You want to be confident, and in some cases, that might be showing a midriff or a little bit more cleavage or etc. There's also time and freaking place. So while I understand it, there is a way for you to be authentic to your personal brand and respectful of other people's boundaries related to how much of your skin you show, for lack of a better way to put it, right? There is a way to have your personal aesthetic be present, front and center, while also being respectful of other people's degrees of modesty. There's a way that you can operate within the lines and still be you. However, based on what I saw today on TikTok, I would say that there is this very strong push by the younger generations that those rules don't apply. And I just don't know that we're in a place right now where all bets are off and you can do what you want. I just don't think so. And I do think that personal style is individual, and that sometimes your clothing choices can offend other people, and we have to be respectful of that as well. And so we want to make sure that we talk about hygiene, we talk about dress code, we talk about all those requirements as far in advance as possible, so that if it's a deal breaker for the candidate, then they just get to go find a better fit for them. So that's a little bit about them arriving at the office. Next thing that you're going to want to do too is like I said, you want to make sure that they understand where their home base is. You want to give them a tour. You want to introduce them to people. And you want to make sure that by the end of their first day or their first week, they really understand the rhythms of the department that they're working in and the team that they're in, and the communication modalities and the boundaries that have been set, and a respectful way to collaborate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You can't just tell them once and then hope for the best. You actually need to coach them through it, because they're going to make missteps. I mean, if you think about getting a pet for the first time, and I know this is going to be a horrible analogy, but like when you're teaching them how to behave in your house, like not to jump on strangers, not to bark all of the time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you don't just say no one time and then magically they know what to do. You have to be repetitive and consistent. And so just like if you were training a pet in your home, or you were teaching your children rules or anything else like that, when you have somebody in a new environment, you first have an opportunity to explain and demonstrate, and then you have an opportunity to follow up and make sure that they understand, and that when they get off track, you gently put them back on. Now, if they're just blatantly saying F you and not following the rules and not doing what they're supposed to do, that's a different problem and conversation. But I really wanted to stick this point home, is that you have a responsibility to make sure that they know all of the things. And then you have a responsibility to make sure that once they know, if they've made an error, that you provide them timely feedback so they can make an adjustment. That's on you. They're still learning. Do not expect them to be expert level an hour after they show up. Now, as I said, after I got interviewed for this article, one of the things that I realized was there is business that has sprouted up or been scaled. I think it actually already always existed dramatically in the space of professional coaching and etiquette. I literally had no clue that business etiquette was a thing. Like I really didn't. And then I started to think about it some more, and I'm like, I've known some executives that have behaved really badly before, and then they've had to have somebody come in and then help them fix their behavior. So I guess I was probably an etiquette coach. I just didn't know that that's what we were calling it. But here's what was interesting, is that when I was speaking with the etiquette coach that I had the opportunity to have a conversation with, and in all of my research, what I realized is that everything that I just talked to you about isn't actually solely what they teach, which I found fascinating. So everything that I just talked to you about, even with an etiquette coach, there's still a gap. And it's pretty material. Etiquette coaches often are coming in to talk about how you carry yourself, how to handle yourself at a business dinner, how to handle yourself at work events, how to behave on business travel, how to communicate appropriately. Absolutely, they cover dress code and some of those other things, but they don't teach you like the inner workings dynamics of business. Now, I just talked to you about like when they first get there and how to assimilate them and get them all comfortable and following the rules of the road inside of the office setting, be it virtual or in person. What the etiquette coaches do is what I kind of see kind of like life coaching. And that I guess I just took for granted, or I didn't really think. I shared this story a month ago that, and I probably shared it here a few times, that really early on in the corporate world, what I realized was that I was the lone woman, and that sometimes there was a drinks after the workday requirement, and that it didn't stop with one drink. And that was problematic. Like, I didn't feel safe. I didn't want to participate. I wanted to be in the right mind the following day for work. And so I developed a habit super early on that I would tip the bartender really heavily, so that no matter what was ordered for me, I got handed back a club soda with a lime and a splash of cranberry. And I was left alone because it always looked like I had a cocktail in my hand. And it was worth the tip, quite frankly. And I did that for years. I don't even know how long I did it. Years and years. And usually I would have like a glass of wine at dinner or like whatever, and then I would immediately switch over to that, and then that would be the end of it. And I was sharing that story because I had to learn that on my own. In fact, when I started working in the corporate world, the rule was no more than 2 drinks at lunch. Literally, 2 alcoholic drinks at lunch. I look back on that now and I'm like, what were we doing? But nobody ever had a conversation with me about safety considerations, about inappropriate conduct at dinner or at the bar or during business travel. Those conversations never ever happened. I never had an HR person sit down with me and say like, hey, it's so exciting, you're finally going to get in travel for the company. Here's the rules of the road. I literally had to figure it out on my own. And the value in bringing an etiquette coach in, I could see right there. I knew what utensils to use. I knew how to have polite dinner conversation. I didn't know how to navigate the social aspects that came with being a professional. And I just got real lucky that my street smarts overwhelmed anything else. And I built a really solid process and policy for myself. So I do think that the businesses that are bringing in etiquette coaches are actually providing a valuable service to their employees. They may just not realize it. With all of that said, there remain gaps. And so what I'm also seeing happen is that companies are hiring etiquette coaches to check a box. They're like, if they go through this etiquette training and this thing happens, then they're going to be the perfect employee, and then I don't need to worry about it, and all is good. And wrong. Just because you watched a YouTube video on how to repair your kitchen faucet does not mean you are a master plumber. So just because you hire an etiquette coach to teach an employee how to behave at business functions and in the office does not mean that they become a master at that. It means basically that they've learned enough to be dangerous. I can guarantee you, if you learned how to repair your kitchen faucet all of a sudden and you did it, all of a sudden you're like, I can do anything. So when your bathroom faucet stops working, the first thing you do is you're like, I can fix this thing. And then you know what happens? Your entire bathroom has been disassembled, the faucet is broken, and you end up spending $2,000 on a master plumber because you screwed up. For an employee that doesn't get the support after the etiquette coach, it looks like them losing their job. That's what it looks like. Etiquette coaches are expensive. You can spend anywhere from $500 to $2,500. And that $2,500 is for like 90 minutes of group coaching. So I just want to say that, like, if you have a business or your business is struggling with the cohesiveness that's coming with the generational change, go get the coach. Make sure you have a support system in place after that to follow through and make sure the education sticks. I'm not going to tell you it takes 10,000 minutes to become a master at something, or 10,000 hours, or whatever that thing is, 6 weeks to introduce a habit. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about is consistent follow-up and follow-through to ensure that something sticks. Do not spend $2,500 on 90 minutes to teach 6 Gen Zs business etiquette, only for you to never talk about it again and then eventually put somebody on a performance improvement plan because they can't behave themselves at the holiday party. That's on you. It's not on them. Did you hear what I said? That is on you, not on them. You cannot expect that one round with an etiquette coach, even if that round is 3 months long, is going to make them the ideal employee. It requires follow-up and follow-through and repetition and course correction and feedback, and sometimes a pip to get them back on the right track. Just like the first day that they walk into the office and you give them all the things and you explain how things work and don't sit in John's chair and don't interrupt Susie unless you've scheduled a 15-minute appointment at her desk, and like all the things that you do there, just like that very first day, you're gonna have to say it again and again and again. They're new to this. They don't know. Like a baby giraffe on their legs, and they're all wobbly and shaky, and they're bound to knock something over or fall over themselves. I don't understand how we got into the world where there's so much vitriol about the younger generation desiring to have a job that we are rooting for them to fail and setting up systems in place so that they will. Do you know what's going to happen if we do not allow Gen Z to be successful in the workforce? Your business is going to die. Your industry is going to die. Nobody wins if we root for and encourage them to fail. So stop it. See, this is the point. I thought, maybe I was going to get through this without getting all fired up and focused around this, but I'm fired up and focused around this. Because what I see happening, and this is why initially the premise of the article frustrated me so much, is because it was set out to say they're not good enough. They are. In fact, they're better than good enough. In many ways, they're better than all of us combined right now. And the amazing thing is that they are untapped talent that has incredible potential if we just help them cross over. I'm tired of people rooting for, encouraging, and looking for them to fail. Stop it. Nobody did that to me when I entered the workforce. Nobody did it to you millennials when you entered the workforce either. So I don't know what the deal is with Gen Z and why all of a sudden we're all pissy about it. But I've had enough, can you tell? Maybe it's because I've got kids that are in Gen Z and Gen Alpha and they're going to enter the workforce one day and I don't want them to have this experience. Maybe it hits a little close to home, but I think more than that is somebody that has advocated for the college hire from the jump. As somebody that was the college hire that just had to figure it out on her own. We are doing a disservice to the emerging workforce if we don't help them. And the last thing that I'm going to say about this, because I respect all of you so much, is that you need to stop being inflexible. You can learn things from them. They're not nitwits. They're just young. And the cool thing about being young is that they're optimistic and creative and innovative and know things we don't. And the best thing that you can do when they push back on you and they're like, I don't want to show up to work dressed like that. I don't want to come in before 10 a.m. Why do I have to work in the office when I can work at home? When they start pushing, when they start challenging, why do we do it that way? Why can't we just create an AI bot to be able to take care of that? When they start pushing on you, the best thing you can say is tell me more. Explain to me why that's your perspective. Walk me through your thought process. You know why? Because it's a learning experience. You may get to the end of it and be like, well, you definitely have some critical thinking skills and your analysis is flawed, so let's work through it. Or you may get to the end of it and be like, I have never seen it that way, and that makes so much sense, and let's test it out. We have to stop devaluing their lived experience because it is different than ours, materially. These kids spent a bunch of time in lockdown while they were in school. These kids didn't get a real graduation of some sort or other, just pick the grade on which one it was. Their lives were disrupted, stalled. There is a defined dividing line before and after. And what has come from that is resilience and creativity. And when we get in their way and we stand there with our hands on our hips and we say, well, this is the way that we do it, so get along or get out. We do not only ourselves a disservice and our business a disservice, but we do society at large a disservice, and most importantly, we do a disservice to them. Because the more that we devalue them, the more that we try to put them in a box and make them small, the more that we discourage creativity and innovation, the more we lose, the more withdrawn they come, the less cooperative they be, and we kill all of the hope that we have for this next set of workers. We have a responsibility to be open-minded, to be curious about what they know and what their perspectives are, to see the world through their lens and determine how we can take what their perspective is versus our reality and build a better future. Gen Z is not a problem. Gen Z is a disruptor. Gen Z is here to make you feel uncomfortable and to get in your way and to change things in the very best way. So do they need an etiquette coach? Maybe. Do they need mentors? Absolutely. Do they need guides? Do they need support? Yes, they do. So if you have a Gen Z in your world, take this, sit with it, ask yourself what role you're playing, and if there's any adjustments that you want to make. I, for one, know that I'm excited to see how work changes as more of them come on the scene and introduce new ways of working to all of us. I hope this is really helpful to you. As I mentioned in the show notes, you are going to have 2 links. One of those links is going to be to the etiquette coach that I talked to. You can go learn about her and her offerings and all of the things. I had a great conversation with her. She seems like a totally good human and well credentialed. So if you need an etiquette coach, you've got her. And then a link to the article so that you can see exactly what I was referencing as I started to talk today. If this was helpful to you and or you know people that are having challenges with Gen Z in their environment, please share this podcast. As you can tell, I'm really passionate about this topic. I want to spend more time with you on it, and I hope that those that need to hear it do. Until next time, friends, please know you are wise and you are capable and you are strong, and I believe in you.